Hello and welcome to my WildSea Let's Learn. This is part 2 of a WildSea TTRPG Let's Learn, where we've been going through the TTRPG book to get through some of the nitty gritty. First part is on the channel already, I shall link it in the description, and it covers most of the WildSea mechanics and the ways of playing the game. This part here will cover mostly around character creation and character aspects and stuff, as well as like an overview of some of the characters you can make in the game, as well as then some brief thoughts and overviews of what I thought of the system overall, which will be at the end, along with some other kind of yappenings. Alright, so that's that. Then if we open the book, ta-da! So, this is WildSeas. When we last left off with the WildSeas, we got to basically a character creation section and basically we went through all the mechanics stuff. We went through all like the process of the world building stuff, and then we got to the point where it's basically you now get to make your characters, and like what character choices do you have, what options do you have with making your character, that kind of stuff. So that's where we're going to go through like today, and that's where I'm hopefully going to try and like finish up with stuff. So when making your character, this is a very powered by the apocalypse inspired, but also they've put their own spin on things to basically give it its own flavor and its own approach with like character creation and on how you build your characters. So first thing I'll note is like discussing your character's backgrounds and stuff like that. I'll go for like your attributes. So these are your attributes. These are the ways you are rolling your checks, whether or not it is with like emotion or precision or with gusto. This is kind of like this is the meat of how you are rolling, and like would say like even like the meat or the seasoning, it's kind of like that. This is like you guarantees like if you're rolling with something like this. So these are your edges, these are your attributes. You can only choose 3 of them when you're creating your character. So you should choose wisely with which 3 you kind of want. I'm going to take a sippy because it's very hot. So when creating your character, you can only start with 3. And you start with 3 and it doesn't change. So choose wisely. So you have grace, which is elegance, precision, agile. This is your dexterous kind of stuff, where basically you want to do things with grace and like nimbleness and like balancing and acrobatical feats and stuff like that. While for like something like with teeth is like grit, savageness, just letting go and unloading and like pure like rapid emotion of getting shit done and kind of going around things with like that way. Give me a second. There we go. Does that? So that's like your like oomph. And like you don't care like how you don't care if you break anything, you just want to get shit done. Consequences be damned. Iron is more of like you're strong, you're fortified, nothing is going to like put a hole through you, leave some dents maybe, but not like completely break you. But you have the determination to like weather that storm. Then you have tides, which is basically you're learning the waves, you're learning the law, and like you're learning about things, you're exploring, you're investigating kind of roles. Again, it's tides because we're in the wild sea and everything in there is just an open ocean that you will have to like go through, sail through, learn and adapt to. And that's how tides works. Instincts is like your literal like your rough intuition, your senses, your reaction times, how you can sense danger, what you can perceive as danger, and stuff of the sort. Veils is being discreet, shadowing, decrypting, uncovering secrets, and basically, and also keeping those secrets yourself and hiding what your main intent is. So you have that. And then like sharp is logic, quick wit, planning, like a quick, clean knife cut plan to cut through the meat of the potatoes so you can get to finishing your meals. That's a good analogy. Good job. But yeah, so that's it. So those are the edges, those are your attributes. You pick 3 at the start. So then there's a quick explanation of how they work. And then you have your skills. So you have quite a lot of skills, but your skills are also tied to the languages. I'm not going to go through all of them, but it kind of goes like so for like bracing, which is preparing, breaking, cooking, delve, flourish. All of them give you a good few examples of like how they can be used. They're all kind of flexible in ways. You can put 3 points in a skill, and then it's capped. And each skill you have in one of these in these skills is an extra dice. So similar to how you have a extra D with your edges, you'll get extra Ds with your skills. And things will work through like that. And then your skills have ranks, you have a maximum of 3 ranks, as I've just said. And how they work in combat is usually like you'll pick the skills primarily that you want to use for a check, whether or not it being in combat or investigation or in narrative play. And basically, as you're pushing through and doing that, you basically then you like say, I'm going to roll this skill. I'm going to like brace a skill. And like, how do you want to brace? I'm going to brace with edge. Or I'm going to brace with iron. And like be strong. Whether it. Alternatively to your skills, you have a number of languages that you can learn in the WildSea. So each bloodline might have their own language, or might have a set of language or a set of dialect, depending on what they are. These are very much like this like bloodline or these races will have this language kind of like intuitive to them with how they speak. So like certain bloodlines may speak a certain language because it is the most comfortable way for them to speak. Say there is a race that is basically you are a masked form of spiders in a trench coat. You're not going to speak perfect, fluent, common. You're going to speak spider in a trench coat. Or in this game's case, knock. So you have a number of languages, a number of dialects, a number of interpretations. Every character knows low sour, which is kind of like the common of common in this system. It's pirate speak, basically. So everyone has a case of low sour. I'm kind of skeptical about giving players just a 3 dots in low sour right off the bat over a language that they may say my character's inherent language is like knock or hand signs or old speak or Catonic. So I would leave a leeway of saying you can choose one language to set to 3. This is your core language. But then also remember, you don't have low sour at 3. So like common pirate talk or common sailor's tongue may be very weak for you to understand. So like if sailors on a ship are like telling you about stuff that's going on, you might actually have to roll to interpret every single little thing, which makes things more difficult. But that is a choice I would probably open up to my players. So again, there are a number of different languages. Low sour is the common denominator, but then you've got stuff like mushroom, like S language of chemicals, or basically like a language of smells, senses, and stuff like that. Then you have like knock, which is the Zalikri's hive mind kind of thing, which is basically like bug pheromones, bug chittering, like cicadas, how cicadas chitter, and stuff like that, and how that can communicate, and how that can communicate to people who aren't a massive insect wrapped in skin. So that's how you play with that. Then there's like old hand, which is basically your basic hand sign communication, signaling, which is knowing like codes, most code, flag signs, and like common encode encryptions, so they could vary very differently. Then you also have like breast tongue, which is more like a kind of like a machine or like grifter, like sliding of coins kind of stuff. And they all can kind of be like interpreted very differently as things go along. So it's very much like up to like how the GM or the players can interpret each language and how they go about things. All right, next up, aspects. So with aspects are like the main traits and perks that your post, bloodline, and origin will help you accumulate as you start. Each aspect, or like the best way I can think of them, you can think of these as these are your feats. These are the main parts of you that you use in your day-to-day adventuring. These are the tools of your trade. These are the things that you keep in your pocket knife. And a pocket might even be one of them. So aspects are basically, you have the name of your aspect. You have the track. The track is basically the aspect overall HP, meaning how many slashes of the track to this aspect can you take until the aspect is too damaged that you can't use it further until it's repaired or healed. So again, aspects don't have to be like a ability or of sorts. They are a part of you. They are physical, practical, or spiritual, but they can take damage. They can no longer be used when they're exhausted. So this is like a tool, like the Jerry Saw, which is a saw that's used to hack through branches, trees, and vines. Obviously, if you're using that and it's just a free-tracked piece of gear, it's not going to last all the time. It can degrade and it can break. So if you start taking too many slashes to that tract, then you're going to say your Jagsari is so broken or so dull that it can't be used further. That works with everything, and all of these aspects will accumulate to your overall HP. So you don't have HP in itself as like a normal hit point. You have your tracks, and your tracks are the tools you have, and when you have exhausted everything, or you give yourself a specific track that says, if this track fills up, you're down and out, then you are out. So you kind of get an idea of, this is how much I can exhaust before I can't do anything. So again, this goes into stuff like aspects, damages, and like aspect damages and abstract damages and injuries. It's like you might take something out by saying like the track is marked, but it doesn't mean like it's broken or like it might just be you've exhausted it. So it might be like an ammunition resource. And then like developing them. So you start off with a number of aspects depending on the type of like character you're wanting to create, which is usually like young blood or old dog. I highly recommend old dog. I will get to that later. But once you have that, you can only have 7 aspects total, I believe. So if you want to level them up further or get more aspects, you will do that by developing them, by leveling them up, so to speak, by adding new things to them. So, for example, this could be like changing a damage type of an aspect, or changing the like number of tracks they have, or how easy they are to be repaired, or how they can affect a roll. So like, as you're spending EXP to develop, think of it as you are evolving your aspects, evolving yourself, and improving over time as you are learning these new traits, or adapting new traits with your existing traits. So again, combining aspects is another alternative that you can say. So like, rather than replacing aspects or getting new aspects, you merge them together, and it's kind of like complete. Like, say for example, you want to add a pistol to your fighting style. Then what you could do, if you have like either a pistol aspect or a fighting style aspect, you could say, is there a gun aspect I can merge with this fighting style aspect to increase my range or increase the type of damage I want to do? And then you can do that. You have creative licenses within like common stuff with like your GM of what will work and what might not work. And it's trial and error. You can kind of like figure stuff out. You have like the room for like fixing stuff. And then obviously certain aspects might be resources that you can spend, as well as like resources that you will acquire as you progress through the game. Resources will kind of be like the main thing that gives you like extra dice or extra advantage. So by exhausting these resources, that's how you basically will be like surviving or healing or creating things. So like resources do play a vital part. Think of them as extensions of your aspects, or basically extensions of your like your abilities and your skill set. I will now take another drink. Your resources can go into different ways, so they can go into like general salvage, so basically equipment, broken equipment, kind of stuff like that, stuff that can be used for the terms of equipment, or like say repairing like damaged gear, or like repairing an ironbound, and that kind of thing. Next up, you have your specimens. So your specimens are more medical and alchemical kind of stuff. And then, so basically like medicinal agreements, herbs, fruit, pieces of monster, that kind of jazz. So that's what you kind of use. You'd kind of like use what you have in like specimens to create healing equipment and healing salves, and like work for stuff that way. Or like, but also specimens can rot unless like you go through special methods of preservation. Next up, whispers. Whispers are very fun because they can also be very vague. So whispers are like wild secrets that leap from mind to mind. They are like words and memories, and like these are the things that you might teach or like get inspired or think about. These are like your epiphanies, your muses kind of stuff. And like they can appear like, if you want to, you can make them a very physical thing that can like occur to you as like brainstorming or epiphanies. These are the things that can come to you and reach, and that's like, if you have a whisper, you can say, I want to reach this whisper I've had. That might be like a set of words or a phrase. I say, I want to use this whisper for this like single check I want to do. And then like through working along with that and like explaining it, you can kind of like, right, so like say for example you have a whisper to say that kind of like means I'm always ready for a situation. If you have that whisper, you can use that whisper, but then it might fade away depending on the kind of role and kind of stuff like that. So it's like, these are the secrets that you can uncover, or secrets you might learn about other people. They are like very much like twists in the narratives you can gain. And a good way of getting through them is through using twists, which is mentioned in my previous part, where you roll 2 of the same number in a check. That is called a twist. It is a thing that is the players agreed with alongside the Firefly or GM of an extra thing that can happen or an extra thing you get from a roll. Very often or not, I would say let your players take a whisper as like an epiphany of later rolls. Next up, you have, lastly, we have charts. So charts are your physical writings, scriptures, maps. They will most likely be maps, and they can be very like vague in ways that they are. So like when you find a map, describe it in like vagueness, and then let your players decide where those maps could lead to as they're studying them, or like let the players like ask the GM, okay, we have this map. Where does this map lead to us? And these are very much like the ideas that you might use your charts to either trade with other like sailors to get other charts, or like trade like charts for resources, or trade the charts you're currently mapping out for like new information and stuff of the sort. But also, these are kind of like the things that lead to your new adventures. So finding a chart is kind of like giving the GM a new path you could walk in a role, especially like an explanation. In like an exploration West Marches campaign, that kind of stuff. Also, everything can kind of like be broken down into like cargo and stuff for like cargo tags. I use that kind of thing. I've used this in my one shots as kind of like a very vague of like this is cargo. Your cargo is just a crate full of stuff. It can be anything. It can be nothing. It can be just stuff that is traded for more cargo. I also kind of use the same for like when my players wanted medical supplies, creating a like cargo of medical supplies that stays on the ship, and going about things that way. Okay, next up, your player gets Myers. Myers are the things that you can emotionally impact your player. The way you can think of them as, these are your bad traits, these are your nervous tics, these are the things that can break your character down if they can't clear those vices. So these could be things like, again, the examples given here, your trigger finger itches uncontrollably. Say this Maya starts tracking up, that trigger finger is gonna get you in trouble. Like, say for example, you want to shoot someone, and your itchy trigger finger is overzealous. So when you're trying to roll a check, I might say, cut a dice or roll with disadvantage. So you want to shoot, your finger's a bit. No. Your trigger finger goes away, you shoot yourself in the foot or something of the sort. So yeah, those are Mayas. When you start playing, you take 3. Depending on the kind of character you're making. All dogs start with 3. Drives are the things that push your character forward. So moving towards a drive is a good way of like giving an idea of like what your character's drive is towards. And like the way that you can do it is like saying by you pick a drive. So like this is like a goal of your character or like a mantra of your character they hold themselves highly by. And then if they go for it, this might be a case of like if they are actually within their conviction, they may gain a whisper, like a mantra or an epiphany. It might clear away the Mayas. They may gain minor milestones because it's leading them towards what is driving them. Or like they may start leading them towards their major milestones. And those are drives. If you're an old dog, you start off with 3. And again, milestones, you get as you're playing, you will get minor milestones, which will, upon completion, give you like 1 EXP. These are generally like your goals for a single session. So when the session starts, we will like usually give you like your minor milestones. You can make yourself more minor milestones and like extra like goals and side quests that you can try and like figure out. While like your major milestones are like the resolvement of an act, of a session, of a number of sessions, like our narrative arc for your character that you've set for yourself, and then upon completing that major milestone, you would like get 3 EXP. And 3 EXP is usually enough to like actually level something up. So like again, you'll see milestone projects, so like this is stuff you would do in downtime, is like you would figure out. And then you would spend like your unused EXP as a way of like adding a box to your aspect track, so like improving the health of equipment, developing another aspect like fresh, learning new skills, learning new languages, gaining like a fresh new aspect, which is a lot harder. And then like, or like gaining like, or combining 2 aspects together. And those are the ways that you can kind of like spend EXP. So then, extra tracks. So you aren't just bound to the tracks of your aspects, as like with your character stuff. You can get extra personal tracks. So these are things that you like are giving to yourself, or you are getting through play. Where it's kind of like you're getting an extra injury or something bad's happened to you, or like a consequence. Like rather than me saying track down your aspects a certain amount, I might give you like a like broken arm or broken hand track that like says, okay, until this is like full and healed, you can't use that hand well, so you're going to struggle. Or say, for example, okay, you've got this like disease. If it ticks all the way, you're going to hit the full effects of it. You need to like keep that pendulum low until you can find the cure to remove that track, and kind of stuff like that. Also, the same with benefits. So, like, a common benefit is like a very good meal, which might like give you a number of benefits that like you can spend stuff and like get extra rolls of the sort. Or you can like say, hey, this benefit track I've got, can I tick that instead of like the like taking down my aspects? Can I just mark this track as well? Like you could get the benefit of like extra armor or extra stuff, or even like extra potluck or like extra equipment. So these are like your temporary equipment, your temporary benefits, your temporary boons of sort. So like say you go around, you're rummaging around, you find the shield. You're gonna take that shield with you. That gives you a temporary track of like, I have this shield I found. It has a number of tracks, but I'm going to use it. So like, you could probably like say, I'm going to block this hit with this shield I've just picked up. It takes the hit, it gets broken, then you lose it. or like at the end of the session when you choose like you can't carry that shield any further, drop it, and then you lose the track, and that's kind of how it plays along. So yeah, now we're going to get to character creation. So usually with this, with like quick start characters or freeform characters, you have a number of things you can do. So you can either be a old gun, or basically be a young gun, which is like your very fresh face, very unique, very young, like sailor. So with a young gun character, you start off with 3 edges. You have 8 languages or skills that can only go up to rank 2. You take 4 aspects from any bloodline, origin, or post you have. You get 4 resources, and you have your 3 Mayas and drives. I highly, unless that you really want to start off on the back foot, I don't recommend making a young character. I think there is a way with the rolling system that basically means you are only rolling 1 dice at a time, which means you are failing a lot. And being a young gun is very much like kind of like a downward spiral, where you're only good at the things that your character seems good at, rather than being good at plus something, which you can get with being an old dog. So with an old dog, you get those 3 edges, you get 15 skills or languages, which kind of gives your character a bit more personality in what they can do. They can do what they're assigned to do, plus something else. So you don't feel super hamstrung or super gimped. You also get 6 aspects from your bloodlines, origins, and posts, which does mean you only have 1 more free slot available for your aspects, and then you are basically capped, and all you can do is develop. That's something you do have to keep in mind. Your character is kind of like fully formed, fully fleshed out, unless you want to like actually change and swap aspects and lose aspects and evolve your characters that way. Then you get 6 resources and 3 drives, 3 Mayas, and that is your old dog character. Again, I recommend being an old dog because it gives you more personality and how flexibility with your role, especially if you're playing in a smaller group. Having a flexible skill set among all of your characters, or characters that can like multi into like other players' goals and jobs, is very handy. So yeah. So now we're going to get to the meat and potatoes of character creation, which is your bloodlines, your origins, and your post. So your bloodline is kind of like your race. It is your descent. It is you as a mortal being and what kind of mortal being you are. Origin is kind of like your cultural background, and post is like your occupation within the ship. And then we're going to go through. So ardent, generic human doing what humans can do. So these are the survivors, or the ancestors of survivors of the pre-verdancy. So by being alive themselves and not being a statistic, humans are tough. They've been able to survive without having to completely evolve their form through the use of equipment and sort. Which also means they're very tight-knit depending on like the cultures they're from. They can be from a number of vast origins. So then they get aspects of like being tough, being an actual survivor, healing stuff. Like they might have like developed something of sort of like ghost sight, or having a strong stomach so they can survive what they eat, and sorts of that. Then it's like generic human equipment, machete, scimitar, a good long coat. Those are the tools of an ardent. Those are the tools of a human. So then like gives you an example of like what you would do with a quick kit. If you want to do so, like choose an edge that kind of fits with the ardent's personality. Some skills of examples. Some examples of resources you can have, drives, Mayas, the sort. And that's how you would be a ardent, normal human in a not so normal human world. Next up, cactus people, Ectis. So, Ectis are very tall, very strong, very strange. So, cactus people, very prickly. You can play in any kind of way. You don't have to like limit yourself to being a cactus people. Cactoid is kind of like being the example, depending on like where you want to be, or like what you could just say like, I want to be more floral or something else. The standard is cactus. So no one knows what they are apart from themselves. Like, they're the longest lived bloodline, and also obviously the pre-verdancy has kind of given them a little bit of a buff. They are good for like surviving desert climates and able like storing water with them in themselves. So, like, they can survive like being on a ship for so long without needing the need for food or water of the sort. So they have their ways of surviving. There are also alternate ways of playing them. So like, you can treat them as a singular cactoid, but like a cultural focus of the Ectus maybe to play them as more of a collective. So you could, rather than playing a single Ectus, you could play a team of Ectus. Like, swap them around in play and like that. Of the sort. So again, they have like aspects like being very tall and very towering and very strong. The damage they can do is spiked because they are literally just cactuses who are growing spikes. They can iris blossom, so they can perceive heat. And basically, then you have like kind of like equipment that you can do and kind of fits them. Or they could have bees. Or they could be bees. So it kind of fits with like that. They can kind of like fit very well with certain like posts and jobs. Next up, goo. Mushroom folk. Trypophobia phobias beware. So again, another race that kind of like sprouted from the pre-verdancy and have adapted very well. The kind of just learn of like how to survive by like literally spawning from the ground. They have like their own little fortresses or communities of the pre-verdant era. They yearn to kind of like grow. So they are very soft as mushrooms are. They are very commoditized, so you may like be in a situation where, oh, you're stranded on a ship with your girl's friends. Eat them. Eat them. Mushrooms are good for you. Unless they're like ink caps, then in which case they're poisonous. But yeah. So you're playing with the ideas of like, so you're a girl, you're a mushroom folk, you're not really like seeing because you don't have like eyes, you're kind of like using spores or like senses to like see things around you. Your physiology is like extremely flexible, like you could probably like cut a limb off and grow a different kind of limb. And playing around that way, you don't have to limit yourself to like your basic mushrooms. Like, so again, we have like the wide varieties of mushrooms in the world. You could play off of like what kind of mushrooms are there? Are they an ink cap? If they're an ink cap mushroom, do they have ink cap mushroom abilities, like the ability to just spew ink everywhere? Or maybe like if they get wet, they shrivel and leave the black miasma around. But also like you're not limited to like pure mushroom stuff like seaweed and coral and stuff like that. So they give some good examples. And again, like all of like the aspects to them are very mushroom themed, like spore sacs, fungal fortresses, stuff that kind of like makes them immune to certain effects that the pre-verdancy, like certain plant life can kind of like negatively affect, or like spores and stuff like make them more like grow rather than like cause them to like have respiratory issues like an ardent would. Yes, the mushroom folk do go well with steak. Hey, Mike. But yeah, it's like the go. If you wanted to play Go, you could have like that mushroom sense, that time with nature, almost like shamanistic. They give some like good shamanistic examples of like the posts. But yeah, Ironbound. Ironbound have been the most interesting for me to play as a DM. It's been what basically Ironbound are the byproduct of a ship that has spent way too long sailing. So as the ships are sailing across the WildSea, they are accumulating or like sailing over the chemical that causes rampant growth, but also may have a number of different effects. So you may be in a ship for too long, it sails for too long and starts calling you senpai. Is one idea I had. where literally the ship will develop a mind of its own by acclimating with the crews over time, or should the worst happen and that ship sinks, that ship is now at the bottom of the wild sea, accumulating all of this like gunk and chemicals that will force it to kind of like evolve. And that's where Ironbound come from. Ironbounds are basically the children of sunken ships. They clasp and give themselves form before they are like birthed. So a sunken ship may create one Ironbound, they may create a number of Ironbound, but those Ironbound need to form. So they will start tearing that ship apart, taking the bits that they can do to give them the most familiar form they have. And what's the most familiar form the ship would have been familiar with? Humans, mortals, their crew. So, an idea of being an Ironbound is you are literally a ghost ship trying to be alive, which is why there is a certain bloodline that I find gravitates to Ironbound. But also Ironbound have that desire to be mortal, but also have the history of their travels as a ship. So one example I had, or one example I used for my players for a one-shot I had, was a ship sunk and many different kinds of Ironbound were born from that ship, adopted the name from that ship, and then went out in the world until we got to the player character who was literally the last Ironbound born from that ship and could only just accumulate a single diving suit rather than like being like a mass of gears, metal, wood, and like the ghostly aura that these ships have. It was just a single diving suit, not a full-bound Ironbound, but it also led to the fact of he could leak his miasma very easily and leak the memories of that crew around, and those were his Mayas. So yeah, Ironbound, very interesting, very nice. Again, they can be huge and have Titanic. Again, Ghost Heart, which leads to the fact that they are literally just born and accumulated from memories of their crew. And stuff like that. Give me a second. Let me smack. Bonk. Bye-bye. Okay, back on track. So, Ironbound tend to lean towards being indomitable, being strong, being sturdy, being made of tough stuff. And that's what kind of like things kind of lean towards with being an Ironbound. And there are fun and interesting ways to go around it, as well as like the kind of damage you can be resistant to, and of the sort. Ketra, squid folk. Ketra are a mystery to the pre-Verdant era. No one knows where they came from, not even themselves, kind of thing. They're a mystery that is. It's weird. Like a lot of the suspicions are that they are human, and if that is the case, well, how did they evolve to be as they are? And like, what was the cost of evolving up? They are like Ketra as a bloodline live in the dark. They are like very bottom of the WildSea mystery kind of stuff. Then they climb their ways up, which means that they also have a very strange physiology. They are very flexible in a sense. They can basically, their entire body isn't like, it is basically a gelatinous jelly with bones. And this can lead to things like they can change their bones very easily, which makes repairing breaks very simple. But also, like a squid or like an octopus, they can squeeze through tight spaces very easy. Or it can change to like how light they are, how they can adapt to being in underwater if they ever get into that kind of situation. So and then it's a lot of things you can consider is like, so what is your history as a Ketra? Were you born in like a pre-Verdant community? What is your Ketra's community like? Is it very like old god worshipy, or like did they live more like towards the top and have their own way about things? So again, they have a gelatinous form, which means they have an inherent weakness to salt. So do not salt your Ketra. But also, they can means they can kind of like have a bit of resistance to blunt damage, or like can squeeze through stuff, like crawling pattern. They can very easily implant things into their body because they don't need to actually cut in their skin. They are literally just ooze. So it's very easy to just like store things in them, is to say. And also, they kind of like have they can be very translucent. You could play with the idea of them being an octopus and give them camouflage. Those are ideas you can consider when being a Ketra. Mothrin, lovely moth people, don't have to be moths. They can be other insects. There are also other insect races, but Mothrin is kind of like the go-to. They are a very short-lived kind of race, although you don't have to play with that. They do have a mechanic that you can lean to, or a GM can allow, that allows them to kind of have like a pseudo-reincarnation. But they kind of like very small, very fragile, very live free, die fast, chasing that flame kind of idea. They do have wings, meaning that they can also fly. They are very small, very big, depends on how you want to play them. Going around with things, living loose. They can also be very fluffy, or very like not so fluffy. Well, fluffy can catch fire, or being insolent. But again, so one idea that they can have with being like this short-lived race is how being a short-lived race kind of affects them as a community. So if you sail away, if a Mothrin sails away, then that Mothrin is probably never going to see their home again until they die. So it could lead to a case of like, do Mothrin naturally live as truffles, live as nomads? Or like, how long is a ship Mothrin going to be in your crew for? There is a way around with this. Is again, their average lifespan is 20 years, or a little over. But one thing they can do is when they're nearing the end of their life, they can wrap themselves in a little cocoon and emerge from that cocoon as like a new Mothrin, maybe with some vague memories of who they were before, but still wiping away the years and wiping away the slate clean. Whether or not they come back out as a larva is up to interpretation. It could just be like literally like reincarnation, new year, new me kind of stuff. But there is a cost to it, and the cost is usually like memories or past experiences or identity and looks. And that's how it is with Mothrins. Some of the things you might get with Mothrins is like Dustin's very slim form, very elegant wings so they can fly. Thick fur, which makes them resistant to flames. Also, chasing that flame, it could be a part of like their culture of sort. So we had in one of my one-shots a player who was a Mothrin who was also a pyromaniac. Very like a cult from like the conflagration, which is the great fire in the north that ever rages. He was also a part of that. He was a pyromaniac that kind of like set places on fire and then went away like near the end of his life chasing a new purpose. So you can go away with things with being a Mothrin. It's very fun. It's very like playing fast and loose, playing like a halfling. Zealotry, the hive race in this game. So Zealotry are born and they are a hive of either like coherent swarm of insects. Usually in this case they are a swarm of spiders, but they can be different kind of like insects or kind of like hive things. So you could have a Zealotry who is literally just a mass of bees, or like a mass of different kinds of insects, or massive worms, or massive centipedes. But spiders is kind of like the go-to with Zealotry, mainly with the idea that spiders can spin webs, so it kind of like is a good way of like they have a way of like stitching the bodies they can get to put together, because that is kind of like that is how the Zealotry form is made. Zealotries are made from the bodies of the dead. They are very recycle friendly that way. So a Zealotry may see just a rotten corpse and go, no one's using that skin. Steal. Knit. they have a new body, probably with some extra arms. And so again, one thing you can think with like being a Zealotry is literally puppets. They are puppeteering or piloting a body. And they will usually have a mindset of having a body that is as best used to the hive. So like practicality, so like multiple limbs, multiple ways around it. Some might lean towards elegance when you're making a Zealotry. So it's very much like that way. But Zealotry is not an individual, as Zealotry is a hive. So that's something you can play into as well. Whether or not you're playing as the queen of that hive or like a full-on hive mind is up for you to play. So again, you can play with the idea of like having an arachnid mobility, like being able to climb walls. Skin, a lot of your skin's like just having lots of skin on hand. You never know. Like just like, oh, one your mate's just died. He's handy. He was a really good friend of mine. He has a nice strong body. Let's put it in the closet until we need it, kind of stuff. Also, kind of leads the ways to you're a massive spider, so you can deal toxin damage. You can really like get under people's skin, and like could be like an interesting way of fighting is literally pocket spiders, or sending a spider out as an individual agent. You can play around with it quite a lot. I do like Zealotry. Zealotry are a very fun idea of a place, of like a race and characters that's not quite like seen around. And so those are the main races that you can play that are extras, but I won't get to them for the sake of this because they are from other books. Next up, Origins. Origins are your history, your backgrounds of who you are. So the first one that they give us an example is Amberclad. So Amberclad are basically people who have been encased in amber from the past, and then I get uncovered, or the amber has given them abilities. So usually this is a byproduct of they've gone back. They are a case of like, so they've been unearthed, they've been cracked open. The amber has given them some power, but also like the world that they were from is gone. So there's that culture shock. There's also like the mystery of the amber. Where did the amber come from? Why do the people who come from these amber have strange powers? Or they are also prized in a commodity. So like certain barons or pirates might value the price amber can bring, an amberclad can bring, even if they're still encased. So like their memories, their personalities, even as labor, the amberclad are valued. So unearthing an amberclad or being unearthed as an amberclad is in itself a danger. You're really like playing the lottery with like who found you, or what kind of like what kind of new life you are living, and that's kind of like how you're playing with your origin. So you have like you have your memories of the past, and like you know what the golden age was like. Maybe you also might have like memories of the past of like how things got so shit. The amber is like giving you new powers. Like you have amber in your veins, which makes you like more sturdy, more strong. There's also a case of like it shattered your limbs, so now your limbs are like controlled fragments of amber, kind of stuff. Or like you might have been encased with an old ally or an old friend who was trapped in the amber with you, and you have that strong bond, even if it's like maybe like a paranormal bond with them. Anchored, the favorite origin of all Ironbound. So anchored is ghost. You are a spirit. You have already died. So this is why it is valued by Ironborn, because Ironborn never truly live. They are literally born from death in a sense. That's why like a lot of Ironbound may lean to being an anchored as like a default origin. Which I also recommend because it does give you some very interesting abilities. But the idea of being an anchored is you have died, but the world wants you to live. So the spirits or the WildSea itself just giving you new life or new form, even as like just a revenant. You have no idea like how you were made and anchored. There are lots of ways though. Maybe you grow literally just a plant that's like just connected up of a corpse, and like rather than like being that person reincarnated, you are a plant mimicking someone as an anchor, or like you are following your directive, or your emotions were so strong that your ghost came back, or you were met by a captain of a squid ship called Davy Jones who asked you if you fear death. Those are many ideas of how you could be an anchor. But also, you are now connected, you are now tied, you are now anchored to death. Which gives you some fun little things. So, like, you have spectral vision, you can form a ghost blade, you're also very weak to salt. Basically, you can walk through walls, disappear, fly. You're much more unique than the other guy. Kind of deal. Ridgeback. So, Ridgebacks are the cultures of people who were already by the mountains by the time that pre-verdancy happened. So they spent more lives living on the mountain ridges and the cliff sides rather than in the WildSea themselves. This means that they have kind of like more close to the ground, more closer to earth. Stuff hasn't changed or shifted with the WildSea because the WildSea can't move mountains. So it's allowed the Ridgeborn to be more rooted in place, so to speak. So like they may have kept more of their settlement, of their cultures, because they are not from a spit. They don't have to move around constantly, which means they can be more steadfast. Or in some cases, be more stubborn. Be more stubborn. And go around things that way. So a lot of things like maybe like is they're very like built because they're like climbing mountains constantly. They're living in that very thick air. Like they might have a bit of shamanistics. They might have some birds companions, or like they might have tools that are more built for like digging through tunnels and the sort through like that. Like a lot of like the theme of being a Ridgeborn is like this bony stuff because a lot of it is from like they're digging into the mountains, so they're uncovering bones and sorts. So they're very tribalistic, a shamanistic culture. But again, like living on the mountains, like very high altitude. Rootless. You don't have a spit. You don't have a ridge. You have just kind of like been floundering and roaming. You never have a real place in your life. But that also means you are more adaptable than any other place. That has like led you down to being like stuck in like one place for too long. So by being so fleet-footed and roaming around, you're probably like very more like experted at like wildlife, wave walking, that kind of jazz. But it also means you've kind of been living a life more in solitude and loneliness rather than like as a collective or like people who have been like sailing ships all their life. It's a very like lonely existence. Like you might just have like a small tight knit family and stuff like that. But you're never in one place for too long. But it also means you are ready for any kind of situation. Which could mean like you're born from like a single family ship that you've spent all your life on until like you've dumped onto another ship of the sort. You might have like a normal bestial companion, or you might be more into like spotting flowers, or a single location. So again, like you're more like tight knit with your family ties, not have a whole heart. You might have more ways of like surviving in the WildSea than your average other origin. Or like you might have like more resources like a like phrase book, which can help them like interpret languages and like people have crossed by on their paths, or spits they've frequented. You're very well traveled as a rootless. Shackling, this is kind of more of like a unique culture of sort. This is very much like a culture of people who have spent more time like flying, being in the sky, living in higher areas, like the higher, taller trees, which has led them to like needing to adapt by like flying and gliding, and also like being more visible, like birds and using birds' colors to kind of like confuse and like signal. Not quite had a full way of like understanding the shark thing. Like they are very like flamboyant in how they are like dressed in colors and bright colors and high fashion. But also like they are very much like a flying class. They kind of lean to the way of like very high climbers, very high gliders. There are posts that they are very good at like adapting alongside with certain posts. But however, the posts that they are good with aren't in the core book. So like there are like kite sailors, jetpacks kind of classes, but they're in a different book. And again, they get to use high ground for their advantage, the good vision, grappling hook, gliding stuff. They have a lot of tools that help them fly. And also have like raptor tools that can help them deal damage. Right. Spitborn. So spits are kind of like the islands of the WildSea, the like ports of the WildSea, the hub communities of them. Again, each of them like are unique. They might have their own little advantages, disadvantages, the corruptions, that kind of stuff. But the one thing is now, like, because you've Spitborn, you spent all your life there, it's now time to move on. A lot of things you might want to explore is like why you're moving on from that. Why are you like leaving your split? Why are you leaving home to be a sailor? There's a lot of things you can explore. But again, it all depends on the kind of spit you're from and how you aspect your stuff as a Spitborn. Depends on like the spit you're from, the home you're from. And a lot of your aspects are more of a reflection of where you were from rather than like who you are. Kind of stuff. But also, yeah, you have to be aware that spits don't last forever. So root quakes and like exotic creatures and animals and monsters and leviathans move spits and force spits to relocate constantly. And that's all the posts. Oh no, that was that is all of the origins. So now we are moving on to the posts. So the posts are the jobs of your basically of the WildSea. They are your classes, they are your main roles, they are your main professions of being in the WildSea. There are quite a lot there, and they meld with the origin and the post. I probably won't go into super detail of them all, but I'll kind of like give you like vague descriptions. So again, like alchemist, potions, brew potions, concoct stuff. Whether or not you want to throw stuff that explodes or throw stuff as in healing resources, you can figure that out by brewing potions and figuring it out, which also might make you a good salvager of like understanding specimens and figuring stuff out. Like, do you want to create things that can deter like monsters or creatures? Of like the certain aspects could be like specific potions that you are brewing, so like explosive vials or like living liquid and stuff like that. So a lot of like the alchemist you are and the aspects you take very much determines like the kind of like scientist you are. Chars are the name for the cooks of the WildSea. Their job is to find the creature, kill the creature, cook the creature, make sure no one dies of dysentery. And again, like, so that's the whole point of the char. So the char is your chef, your cook, your senjis of the WildSea. And their goal is to acquire specimens, not so much like the alchemist might use a specimen to concoct something. You use them to create good meals that your players can benefit from. It means you have a nose and a tongue for fine cuisine and what pieces of a creature you want to cut and harvest in order to cook the best meals. You are the Gordon Ramsay of the WildSea. You make sure your crew eat fucking good. And a lot of your aspects reflect that. And a lot of your Mayas reflect that as well. So a char has a very nice trick that is very game breaking, because one benefit you can get as a char is you can cook things good with rotten food, and you can have a Maya that causes food to rot. Meaning, getting a Maya is a bonus for you as a char. It is very gimmicky. It is hard to fully pull off. It very depends on the role. It could lead to your entire like crew being gimped and having disadvantage for a while if you cook something really bad for them. But if it plays off, you have a lot of like good stuff you can play with. Again, a combination of like fruits you collect rotten sour in jars and deep in the barrel are a good way of like utilizing a bad thing like your Maya with a good thing. I do not endorse poisoning your crew though. Alright, Corsair, your swordsman, your cavalier, your pokey person, one of many, does primarily go with being a like commander, a captain, a swordsman. So again, a lot of the stuff is very much like sword formations and ways of attacking. This is a very combat-focused class. A lot of the aspects you pick as a Corsair determine more of like your fighting style, how you hold yourself, what kind of weapons you use. Like you could have like a nice like flexible, mobile way of like moving around, so like you can't get hit or hurt. But also like instead of like using a Corsair saber, you're using broad axes. A bit more flimsy than a sword, but still there. Or you could be a jack of all trades using multiple weapons. Those are your options. An advantage of having multiple weapons, though, is if one weapon breaks, default to a different weapon, or you can use weapons for different damage types. So it's a case of like understanding what your enemies or creatures' weaknesses are when fighting them. So changing the damage types of what you can do can change the impact of what you can do. You can also just go apeshit and go berserk, meaning you're immune to Mayas while you're fighting. I'll just fly into a rage, and that's the Corsair. Nice swordsman, combat-focused type. However, really bad at sailing, which is why you play as an old dog, so you actually have some sailing abilities. Crash. Crash is the role you have where cutting through branches and like hack and slashing will not do it. And sometimes you just need to grab a sledgehammer and break through a wall. So, while not perfectly great for being in the WildSea, you are best suited in the concrete jungles. If you find yourself in a building, you are the guy, you are the breach. You are going to have so much fun if you find physical structures. Oh, well, this building was like 500 years old and it's full of antiques. Hammer time. And that's where the crash kind of goes in. And that's a nice little combat demolition focus build. Plays around with explosives, plays around with like being able to survive the destruction they're wreaking. And it's very much like so the idea of being a crash is sustaining and like withstanding the shit you're getting yourself into, while also barrel rolling through stuff and crashing through things and just being like everybody's worst nightmare. So like one of the main things is being a crash on an enemy ship is Christmas to a crash. Because once you're on an enemy ship, you just start smashing their ship apart. And they can do naught but scream and try and throw you overboard. So you are chaos incarnate. And have fun with that. Dredger. Dredgers are the dumpster divers of the WildSea. They are the ones who go very deep, very down, to find very good stuff. A dredger is not afraid to get down and dirty, but also get covered in Cresarine and evolve a third arm. So, with that, you are more focused on retrieval, deep diving, and discerning what is actually worth taking up. So it leads to an idea of being someone with a very keen eye, or a very keen sense. You are the great looter and salvager of the WildSea, meaning you get to pick what you're kind of wanting most of the time. And discerning what you find, and getting more value out of what you find. So an advantage of being a dredger is that you are very good at deciding what you find. So, oh, you found a copper ring. You use a certain thing, and you can just say, no, this isn't just any copper ring. This is the copper ring of fuck you. I'm going to stab you very hard. And then it pulls out a giant knife. So a lot of your aspects are kind of like salvaging related, getting value from stuff. Helps you get the good stuff more. Very gameplay specific. So if you're playing as a dredger, you're playing a very dredger campaign. So you're very much going to be a case of like, hey, Captain, find us something good. And I'll find us something good. And also it leads you in a situation of you can survive very good on your own and in the dark. Which kind of leads you into a very survival expert. Hacker. So, if the crash is very good in buildings, the hacker is very good in nature. And by very good in nature, I mean they will cut through anything that comes around the ship or anything that gets in the way. So, while the crash will break through a wall, you will chop through thick brushes. So an advantage of this is you have a very nice saw. But also you are not as durable as a crash. So a lot of your cases are finding the right ways to cut through and figure out your ways of like navigating the ship. You're playing around like the idea of like harvesting and picking stuff apart and figuring out what plants are actually good to cut through. And then also a case of like Kezarine is a very big danger in the WildSea. You don't want to get it on you. You need to find ways of like cutting through stuff without getting the evil bad chemical that can fuck you up on you. So you are more built for cutting through the common obstacles of the WildSeas, which is plant life. Horizoner, your pseudo navigators who look forward, keep spirits high, keep us on the path. Your purpose is to keep people wanting to sail with you. And that is the goal of the Horizon. So you are the bard. You are drumming the drums, singing the songs, singing the shanties, and coming up with new shanties to keep the spirits high. So the depression of having to sail on a ship with the same assholes every day for months on end, in dangerous storms of thrash and monsters, you're there to keep spirits high. You're there to stop people from going insane. So that can very much lead to like your silver tongue, how you can spin a song, how you can perform and use instruments, that kind of jazz, the kind of stories you can learn and tell and spin and create. So you could tell a story, and that story could be used by the GM to navigate things forward for you. It also means you are not the best in a fight. You're very much like a talking situation and keeping people in good spirits. Now, people who are good in a fight is the hunter. The hunter's job is to kill. You will have to kill to be a hunter. But by being good at killing, you are good at discerning what is good to take from your hunt and trophy collecting. So you are very much a flexible fighter, not so much against other people, but against the monsters of the world, of the creatures of the world. Your goal is kind of a setting traps, finding prey, dealing with stuff. Somehow just grabbing a vial of poison from nowhere. So I like the idea, I like the fact that you can literally just say, create a resource called paralyzing venom. From anything. You just pull it out your ass. It's like, oh yes, this nice little squirrel was a poisonous squirrel, and you extract its venom. So you go on with that. And then a lot of things are also like your senses and smelling and tracking, as well as your way of just killing and butchering anything that you can actually finish off. Very handy when you're dealing with a very much a high monster hunting campaign. You're not dealing with that many of like other sailors. You could, like, again, one thing is like playing a team of hunters is always nice. Mesmer. So mesmers get high and use their highness to their advantage. Now, you aren't just smoking weed every day and like getting like psychic visions. Smoke can play a good thing. You might be very adaptable to smoke. Your enemies may not be. So get them smoked. So you play around with the kind of like specimens you're collecting to create your like smokes, to create your concoctions, to create your stuff, and then using that to kind of like psych people out in a sense, and also like keep yourself calm when things get really dire. So a lot of the aspects lead to around of basically having high tolerance for stuff, but also like getting high off your like balls to the wall high and figuring out an orthodox path for players and other people at the table to figure out. Which is where like stuff like knowing the unknown can play in. Navigator does what it says on the tin. Read charts, figure out where charts go, find the correct paths when sailing. Enough said. A lot of their aspects can lead to basically being experienced sailors, knowing what to avoid and where to go, knowing how to sail and wave walk, and spotting out those dangers before your players run into them. And also knowing like stuff like procedure and stuff of the sort. Also, you can turn charts you have into more reliable pieces and sources of information. And that's one of the main advantages of being a navigator is you take a map you find as dusty as fucking hardly legible. You get more of a say in where that's going to lead and how you're going to get to it. As well as doing like things like reading the waves, reading the weather, kind of stuff like that. You're best at the helm of a ship, and sure you are best on a ship, but you're also still a good when off a ship or at port to find better and new charts. Rattle hand, your ship repair, maintenance crew, you're going around. So this isn't so much like repairing the ship or repairing the ship on the fly. This is kind of like finding the contraptions, making stuff that will be handy for being on the ship. You're the engineer, you're the blacksmith, you're the artist of the ship. You're creating the new fancy contraptions to keep the crew running and keep the crew efficient. So all of your aspects lead to the idea of crafting new equipment, crafting new things, and buffing your teammates by creating that new equipment. You are best when paired with actual good salvagers, or being a good salvager yourself. Which means you're leaning towards more two. You're leaning more towards two roles. And that is being the rattle hand. Yeah, it gets to the point where like stuff is like really vague and really simple when you're going along with things. So yeah, screw is more of your ship repaired. So if the ship takes damage, the screw will fix it. And that is how you play around with things. So your idea is your ship's going to take damage as it's sailing, as players fail their roles, and as the ship basically suffers from wear and tear, your job is to kind of like keep the ship up and running. And like also like get the stuff you need to keep the ship up and running and keep things under control. So again, the way you can go about it is by taking the useless scrap you have and using aspects like ferrokinesis to shape that into stuff you can use. So you can take this little piece of sheet metal and just convert it into bolts to keep the ship up and running. And also like there's a lot of like knowing like, oh, the ship's broken. Oh, I can fix it easy. I can fix it without having to stop the ship. And you have like certain resources that can like be very simple. Like you have certain knowledge of like shipbuilding and shipwriting to get through and figure stuff out. Slinger, your gunslinger, your pirate kind of ability, the corsair but at ranged. A lot of like the way you go around it is this is the job you want to do when you want to shoot stuff up. All of your aspects lead to ways of shooting, ways of maintaining your gun, all the kind of gun or like equipment you want to use. you can duel people, you can trick shot, you can fan the hammer, you can hit things from a distance, or hit unimaginable shots. You can wield a revolver, you can wield a rifle, you can wield a sawn off. You can wield smoke bombs. There's a lot of ways of just getting into the thick of things and shooting. Steep. Sometimes you just need a nice, fun little brew to get you through the day. And that's where Steeps come in. They brew the tea. They find the perfect, you sit down, you have a cuppa, you relax. This character can only be played with a British accent. But it's very much you've been through a lot, have a brew. Kind of playing more of a social character in a sense. A lot of the session stuff with a Steep will be concocting tea, sitting down with the crew and sipping or drinking coffee, and keeping the crew in spirits that way. A lot of your traits go around the fact of you're literally just there to brew tea and keep people up and running. You are literally getting up, going, okay, folks, who wants a cuppa? And just heal the crew that way. Not super useful in every other day-to-day things, but on a ship or on a port, you are the tea boy. You keep people in high spirits, you keep people hydrated. Surgeon, for when shit hits the fan and you need to heal really good. So Surgeon have a lot of aspects that kind of lead to them being able to heal better than anyone else can heal in the game. A lot of their stuff is heal real fast, heal real good, heal without spending much stuff. So, first aid, common trait, you should always take first aid. And then it's a lot of things using your healing downtime to heal 2 people really fast, be efficient. With aspects like ceaseless tending, do unorthodox surgical procedures like blood transfusions, concocting similar to the alchemist, concocting really good healing remedies. You are the best in downtime when you have time to heal, or when you are on a ship with lots of medical supplies. Tempest. So, we had Corsair, who was your frontline fighter. We had Slinger, who is your ranged dexterous fighter. This is your mage. So, Tempest can use strange contraptions or forces of nature or magic or whatever you want or whatever you can think of to throw thunder at people and fuck people up. All of your aspects leads around using lightning, conducting electricity, surviving electricity, using electricity and fucking people up. You fuck people up with lightning. That is your job as a Tempest. You fuck people up with lightning. A lot of people are weak to lightning in this game. Kill them with lightning. Power. Unlimited power. Just force lightning everyone. You can also just jumpstart your ship's batteries when they go down. Nice handy ability. Very good on a ship in the background, especially depending on what kind of engine you have on your ship. So if your ship is using ceramic batteries or magnetic mechanisms, you're useful in the engine bay, meaning you are useful in travel. But then in combat, you are a mage. You have chain lightning. Use it. Wordbearers. Wordbearers are your mailmen, your deliveries. They are basically the class or post that can navigate the WildSea and find the best routes to go. You are the mailman, you know your route, you know the fastest way to do your route as efficiently as possible. All of your aspects lead to traveling and getting places and getting away from danger as easily as you can, but also memorizing messages, learning multiple languages, learning multiple words, learning words that aren't known by anyone else. You're basically a backup navigator or a solo navigator. And you are the last line of getting the word out. So if your ship ever breaks down or you need help, you send the word bearer. No, fuck you. Oh god, we're actually called word bearers. Oh, we're doomed. Don't create a word bearer called Loga. It'll be the end of us all. And yeah, that is pretty much it for character creation. Now, this is all going to be stuff I'm going to skim by, because this stuff you kind of do as a group is ships and shipbuilding. So there are lots of interesting ways in which you can build your ships, and like how you build your ships and like the size of it. So usually you go with the idea of building your ship depending on the size of the crew. So you would go around with like, how big's your crew? What the size of the ship you're on? What kind of ship is it? How do you want a bigger ship? A larger ship will be harder to actually navigate and use. What kind of frame is it? How sturdy is it? How strong is it? There are lots of different ways in which you can build your ship, and each of them give kind of like different stats. Then you have like your hull, how's the hull, common hull, stuff like that. The bite is what's actually going to be cutting through the fresh and how like easy it will be to cut through the fresh. Like you have like chainsaws, you have like scales, you can literally crawl through it with grapplers if you want. There's lots of different interesting ways. Then you have your engine, which is what's actually running your ship. There's lots of different interesting ways. Usually the most common is the chemical compressor. It's like going through, so like as you're sailing, you're mulching stuff. And that's like fueling the engine without like lighting a fire. You can have like steam piping, rats, are a good way of piloting a ship. Solar power, magnetic coils, spring-loaded ship. You could just have a group of golems who go out and literally their job is to pull rope and tug the ship forward. You could have hive bees powered ship that gives you like honey engine power. There's lots of options. And then you can get extra things like motifs, extra spice to your ship and how you're building it, what kind of like role you're wanting the ship to play. And like as you're doing this, you notice you see a lot of stakes. Stakes are like tracks for your overall ship's health. And again, I don't want to go through too far into detail. All of this like is very fun to like read through yourself. It's not what I want to majorly focus on because like it's part of the ship, it's part of the building experience. It's nice to learn as you're going along. And again, like so you can have on the crew and gang members and like extra crew hands for the ship that you have to also keep happy, or they'll mutiny. That's where the tracks come in. So like these crews will have tracks where if you start getting up those tracks, they are going to mutiny. And it's the same thing with packs. If the pack goes full, something bad's gonna happen with that pack. They're either gonna die or abandon or fuck off or destroy the ship. And yeah, that's pretty much it from there. So like there is stuff with like session zeros and the sort that we could go through, but my main goal was literally just to talk and yap about the characters for a bit, and then as the final stretch, pull up this table and like show you a bunch of like the example characters that my players had. So, for example, we had Argon, who was a ardent Ridgeback Char, so he was a cook. Again, utilizing strong stomach. This is the player that had the mire that stuff rots, but also had deep in the barrel. His goal in the one shot was basically providing everyone with a food buff that would give them advantage. But then also like being strong and sturdy enough to take some nasty bumps. Then we had Heizo. Heizo was a Mothrin, but he actually changed it to be a birdfolk, a Arakakra. And he was a Mothrin Cosma. Cosma was a DLC, is a origin from another book. And he was a Tempest. And his job was to throw lightning bolts. And he threw lightning bolts and did a good job. So he played with things like his elegant wings so he could fly, his singed coat so he had some resistances, his lightning call so he could chain lightning. And there's the well-fed buff that I got from the chef. And then we have Bermuda, ironbound, anchored, Rattleland. So they kept the ship up and running, but also had a big, strong frame to keep like people like down and like stable. But also like really good at salvaging. And then the other crews we had was like a surgeon. Who was like really good at like healing people, but also was really like handy at dealing damage. And I'll actually use, while I'm here, I will use the final notes of like, so you have two choices with the kind of characters you want to start off with. The reason why I recommend a, give me a second, no aspects, actors, shared players, yes, fun. So this is an example of a Youngblood. And you'll notice that they don't have any many skills past one, so at most, when rolling for checks, they are rolling 2 dice. Maybe 3 if they're rolling advantages. So you need to understand that when you're rolling with like just 3 dice. Getting a 6 is very rare. So getting things like successes with a twist is also very rare. Which means you're rolling with consequences or you're failing, which means you are taking damage a lot. And WildSea is very much an attrition game. So yeah. Alright, so that's the WildSea. I had a lot of fun running the one-shots. And let me just put myself here. There we go. Yes. So, WildSea, final thoughts. WildSea was fun. I had a lot of fun figuring stuff out for this system and finding ways to smoothly run it. It was a nice, flexible system with a very interesting world and very interesting ways of characters, and also dealing with like the rolls and damage. It's like rolling system. The only thing I have with the rolling system, and the only thing I can really comment on it, is there was a lot of rolling exhaustion, where there was just too much rolling happening constantly, and the way that like it was rolling, the rolls were happening was there would be a roll, it would be with consequence, and players were basically checking off their health boxes to mitigate the damage coming their way from their like not even failed rolls, they were successes with consequences, so their average rolls. So they were basically with like the track system and how you want to go up tracks, it encourages you to roll for impact and kind of like try and actually like roll and cutting dice to do more damage and work for those tracks. My players kind of didn't figure it out that way. They thought, if I cut a dice, I'm going to fail more. So I don't want to do that. But they didn't weigh the good with the bad. So they were just rolling constantly trying to actually like deal damage or work for a track. And like work through progression. And basically tick that clock. So it's very much like powered by the apocalypse. It's narrative focused. It's not got very much like mechanical crunch to it. It's very much like discussion focused. So a lot of like the ways you explain stuff and like explain the roles and like they discuss what they want to do. A lot of it is kind of like brought into out of character to discuss things like, okay, so with my character does that, I'm gonna roll, and then I have to go into detail like, okay, so you did this, but then this is gonna happen, mark these tracks, and then I go into the narrative sense of what's happened to that character, and then twists are something that very much stopped and broke the flow of the game quite a bit, because it's asking the players what they want out of it, and then it's kind of like, okay, can I get this out of it? And like very much like I have to kind of just see, like go and agree, but it stops the narrative flow in that kind of sense, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But if you are wanting to kind of like wanting players to like stay in character, or the players themselves are wanting to stay in character, can very much like break the flow down and like impact things that way. So yeah, that's very much an issue of like, I've recently got Fate and Blades in the Dark, so I will have to read them so I can actually like talk about this and know what I talk about. Because like my only experiences with Powered by the Apocalypse games and systems is Starhold, which is a like survival TTRPG, and then Monsters of the Week, which is a Monsters of the Week TTRPG. And those are the only two Powers by the Apocalypse games that I've actually played, DM'd, and have experienced with. I've never played Blades in the Dark, but I now have it. And I haven't played Fate, and I now have that. But I've been told that WildSea is very much a lot like Fate. But one thing I'm again being aware of is role exhaustion and the attrition and resource focus of the game kind of burn people out of like, they're rolling too much, they're burning through their resources. There was so much rolling, so much dice being rolled at every turn that like I as a GM was kind of like, okay, let's speed things along now. Like, you're failing too many rolls and you're taking too much damage. So yeah, so that was that. But it helped honestly, I think me learning Vampire the Masquerade has helped me as a DM because it just clicked for me of how to do narrative combat. Because I was locked and bummed into like the Pathfinder D&D crunch. And now I have that more narrative flow where I'm not worried about battle maps. I'm not worried about rangers. Everything has a narrative flow that I can picture in my mind and describe to my players without having to point at the map constantly. And being the fact that I don't have to draw battle maps constantly, yes, that's probably been like the best thing of going for more narrative, social gameplay and DMing. Because yeah, I love Lancer, and Lancer is a mecha TTRPG, but it is also very battle map focused, and narrative does not lead into battle maps that well. So it leads to a lot of like juxtaposition, if that's the right word, of the way things can kind of like flow into the battle map that kind of make no sense. So not having to do that and letting the theatre of the mind of the players kind of break in and giving me that weird way of description has been very nice. And that is something I'm very much enjoying with when I move on to possibly the next game I'm wanting to discuss, because I'm running a one-shot of it on Saturday. Oh yeah, I like Lancer. I barely mentioned it. And yeah, it's just like, to be honest, I've mentioned Lancer a lot less than I have in recent months, because I kind of, while I love Lancer to death, it has kind of like burnt me out, or like it's made me more rigid of a DM. So breaking free of the chains of Lancer kind of saved me as a DM and like made me branch out and wanting to figure stuff out. So again, and leaning in more into the narrative and less battle map focus of being a DM. So, okay, where was I? Daggerheart. Yes, I recently got Daggerheart. It came out mid-May, and I've been reading through it, and I've got a one-shot that I'm running on Saturday. And I've been really looking forward to it because it's more rules light. It is more narratively driven and narratively focused. And the best way I can describe what I have read from Daggerheart is educate yourself. Because while D&D will hold your hand and tell you to play by their rules, Daggerheart will teach you basic math and then say, okay, we're going to give you these tools. Play with the building blocks we've given you. They have a few set kind of like stories or narrative settings that are tiered into complexity. So rather than giving you like one world or like one story you can play as like a testing bed for like campaigns, you have like 6, and all of them vary in complexity and what you want to do that fit in theme and tone, and you aren't restricted to what kind of races you have in your world and like what your races can do. One thing I'm very happy with Daggerheart is it revels in the fact that they know every single fucking person who's reading Daggerheart wants to homebrew the shit out of it. And they have made an incredibly malleable system for people to homebrew. And with how they've done the card creation system, they have given people a really good outlet of doing it in bits. So, one thing I'm really looking forward to with Daggerheart once I've got shit focused, because I have been making my own homebrew world for Daggerheart exclusively, which is going to be fun to get to talk to in detail. I've also been thinking of what other worlds and what other CRPGs could I play with Daggerheart, and it was so easy. Like literally, like I would show you, but I wanted to keep it in my back pocket. Dragon Age. I had such an easy time recreating fairness and certain classes for Daggerheart. I am already been working on Templar subclass. Oh, yeah. Daggerheart is super interesting. I'm having a blast with it. It's not so much like, it's not going to be like the D&D killer. It's just an alternative that better and more comfortable players will find an easier time to learn, adapt, and overcome. If you don't lock yourself into the D&D Pathfinder mindset, Daggerheart is great. It does have some difficulties, which I'm gonna probably get into at some point, but they are so easy because you are not locked into rules. Because one thing that they literally say is, so if this thing doesn't work for you, don't use it. Adapt it and overcome it and figure out your own way of doing stuff. If you want to create a system for like a new campaign, you can create a new system for new campaigns. You get to control how complex the game is for you. And that's one thing I'm loving with reading Daggerheart so far. I could do with less of the bullshit online games license. I'm gonna have to read through the OGL again to figure out what part of Daggerheart can I actually fucking stream, because the fact that they have a rule saying no, stream if you want to show or talk about Daggerheart and you show the PDF or you show any of the artwork, we are going to cut off your balls. So yeah, I'm not going to be showing the main PDF, which is going to be annoying because the artwork is gorgeous. But I have a carnal fear of literally being struck down. Yeah. Or I might just go balls to the wall and realize, oh no, I'm only a small streamer. They won't castrate me. I'm only small. But yeah. So those are the things that I'm looking forward to. Again, I have a shitload of TTRPGs in my backlog, but certain things have kind of gotten in the way. So like, and obviously I'm going to be cutting this stuff off when I like upload the VOD to YouTube. So like new model is coming along. Not sure when it will be complete because I've told the person creating it, because they're doing it for free, to basically work at their own pace. So my crusty scammed model will not be here for so much longer. So this model you see before you, which is the consequence of getting scammed out of 700 quid and then having to make do, will be gone. But it's serving its purpose for now until like I re-debut and figure stuff out. On the other side of things, I am going into debt because I've gotten back into Magic the Gathering. So I got getting back into Magic the Gathering. I recently got one of the new commander boxes for the Final Fantasy the Final Fantasy like expansion for Magic the Gathering. I got myself one of the pre-conned commander decks. I got myself the Final Fantasy XIV themed one with Y'shtola as a commander, which I'm going to be playing tomorrow for the first time, because I'm going to my local Magic the Gathering store to play Friday Night Magic, which is going to be fun. And yeah, so like getting that, I got myself a booster box and got a bunch of fun cards. Usually, like, because I like my local Morrisons when I'm doing like food shopping, they have Magic the Gathering cards. So like I snagged a couple of packs today, and I pulled Squall, which I'm not like going to like make a Squall deck unless like Skew really wants to get it into Magic, and I'll do that as like an incentive to like bring him into the dark side and make him like a Orzhov black-white deck using Squall as a commander. Which, to be honest, you could probably do on a budget. Like, one thing I have learned, and I'm probably gonna like stick to it now with like playing Magic the Gathering, is just buy singles, buy individual cards on like local stores rather than like Gamba and packs. Like I have a pre-con commander. I might build on that, or like build like a very cheapo deck from based around what I've got, based around like a card or a mechanic that I want to play around with, and then go to my local game store to do stuff with. So that's what I'm going to do tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to be playing Friday Night Magic at my local game store, at my local Patriot Games. Then on Saturday, it's free RPG day, so I'm actually going to be going down there again to playtest a lot of interesting TTRPGs. So there are quite a few fun TTRPGs out there. Give me a second, let me reopen and find free RPG day. There. And then let's let. Come on, yep. Okay. There we go. So yeah, Saturday, June 21st is free TTRPG day. So go through. There are quite a few like publishers that are like working stuff out there. Bring myself like over here. So, there we go. Make myself super small, and like that. There we go. It's like quite a few like offerings, like different systems. 9th level games. This is the system. This is the TTRPG I'm really interested in getting my hands on tomorrow. So this is Thunder Road Vendetta TTRPG. Basically Mad Max. Basically Mad Max the TTRPG. And so I've been super interested in this for a while. I want to get my hands on it. I want to play it. I want to run it. I want to figure shit out for it. And I like other stuff. But a lot of it is going to be like expansions and stuff like D&D. Like different ways of playing D&D, or like different like interesting games and systems and alternatives, like Arkham Horror. Free League is running a bunch of extra stuff for Dragon's Bane. Then also in a few months, stuff's going on. Modifius are going to be like having some quick starts for Fallout, Star Trek, and Dream Machines. Son of Oak. Yes, Son of Oak is going to show off some Otherscape content. And also have some stuff for the new fantasy-focused TTRPG called Legends in the Mist. A more small-scale fantasy TTRPG where you play as a small adventurer leaving their town for the first time. So then, like, normal stuff like Cold Press might have some extra stuff for, like, Pathfinder. Goodman Games will have, like, some expansion stuff for, like, D&D. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot of stuff interesting. I'm interested in looking at, like, a bunch of this stuff on Saturday. So as I go around and, like, learn and figure shit out. There we go. Close that. Make myself big again. There we go. Too big. There we go. Yeah. And then spin. But yeah. So, I set out what I was wanting to do with this stream. It wasn't going to be a long stream. My goal was literally just get the rest of the Wild Seas content out of the